Well, once it gets down, it should drop off. You should be live and going. Oh, guess what? I got my camera working. I'll have to let them know that the phone is not on. We're just going to go with what we got today. We have not much to do.
Hi, I'm GA Charlie. You're watching The Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble, search the channels for The Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean you gotta set up an account, but it's fast and it's easy and it's free. I did it. You can do it. For those technologically challenged members of the class, you can also catch us on Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. Sometimes on YouTube. That's when the professor's not going to get himself censored. Mostly that's just Wednesdays. Then you can catch the podcast after the show. It's uploaded to Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify. Just look for The Road to Concord. You can go to the blog page. That's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you'll find all your show notes and study notes and handouts for class. You can call us at 229-469-0335. Most of the time, I've got the phone working. Finally, you can email Professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow right now, but he'll eventually get around to emailing you back.
All right, we're good. Good morning, class. We're still having fun around here, but we got something that at least approaches normality around here. Thank you to Charlie. This is one time where if it hadn't been for him, today would have been a different day. So Charlie's doing his job, but he's still responsible for everything that goes wrong, even when I'm the one who did it. I want to start out. It is Worship Wednesday. We're going to talk about Easter. But before we even get going, like I told you before, I made a mistake yesterday. I was accusing Tucker of using the wrong pronouns for that shooter, the one at the Christian school. All right. So I thought it was a he that was pretending to be a she. I was wrong. It was a she pretending to be a he. And I'm not going to offer any excuses, but it is getting confusing to keep up with the players nowadays without a biological scorecard. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's part of the plan. And guess what? That's actually part of the lesson plan today. You won't understand until we get going, but you'll get there. All right. See if I can slow myself down and do this right today. This time of year, Easter, right? Passover, Easter. We see lots of memes on Facebook, and you see lots of stories about how Easter is named after the goddess of Ishtar. And that's where the eggs and the rabbits and all this stuff comes from. So for a while there, I thought that was true as well. And it turns out it's not. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the issue of Easter within the Christian church. And we're going to look at exactly what the connection to Ishtar is, because it's there. It is there. Easter is not a biblical holiday. The Old Testament nor the New Testament, neither one of them recognize it. That's true. If you're on Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube today, I've already thrown the link to your show notes up in the comment section. On Rumble, we didn't get it added to the description. We'll tweak the description after the show. We'll put it in there, but maybe if Charlie hears me, he'll grab one of the links that I just posted on the other places and he'll throw it into the chat in Rumble or something. But we'll get that to you. So, and y'all know, you just go to theroadtoconcord.com. So I put all the links of the stories that I found last night when I was working on this in there. And they're the ones that I determined for myself to be most valuable in this. I did find two that are very helpful to understanding this issue. But you're still going to need a teacher to walk you through some of this. And that's what we're about to start doing here. I'm going to pop us into the slideshow. Let's see. Should be up, but it doesn't want to show itself. There we go. For some reason, there we go. Oh, that's too small. Let me see if I can get it bigger. Give me a minute. The screens are not cooperating with us here today. What I'm looking for is this one. All right, here we go. Part 1. We're going to do part 2 of today's show tomorrow. Part 1. The Hebrew or Jewish Passover versus the Christian pagan Easter. We're going to tackle, the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to tackle the Easter thing. And the claim that we see everywhere. Easter is a pagan holiday named after the goddess Ishtar. That's the claim. It's very prominent this time of year. Like I was just saying, it can be presented in a very convincing manner. I got led astray by some of it a couple of times. However, we need to ask ourselves, is the claim true? Now, before I get going real quick, note to Charlie. Charlie, if we have any comments in the comment section that I need to be aware of, please throw them up on the screen because right now I can't see that. Thank you, sir. Next slide. This is a depiction of the goddess Ishtar. And she's the evening and star patron and the goddess of love, war, sexuality, and customarily shown with the emblems of lions as well as owls. Owls denote her position as the patroness of prostitutes. She is connected to a whole bunch of stuff in the ancient world. So you see, she's standing on the 2 lions. She's got the 2 owls next to us. She is a fertility goddess. She is a goddess of prostitution. She's a goddess of confusion. She's a goddess of war. She's the one that she's connected to thunder and lightning and riding the clouds. She's often depicted as being married to Baal or Bel. Both spelt the same way in the ancient Semitic languages, just, BL. But this character, Ishtar, she is prominent, and she does play into both the Hebrew Passover story and the Christian Easter story, and she does the same thing in both counts. So what we're dealing with here with Easter, the idea that Ishtar is behind some pagan practices creeping into the religious church, that's not false. It's just that Easter's not named after Ishtar. So here are some facts I did find, and I'll show you where I found some of them in a little bit here. So, fact, Ishtar cannot be connected to the image of eggs. And apparently, with the research I've been doing from scholars who spend their whole lives in this particular area, neither the egg nor the rabbit was a symbol of fertility in the east part of the ancient world. Not at that time. So Babylon, Acadia, Chaldea, all that area over there that today we think of as Syria, Iraq, Iran, that was not a symbol of fertility back then. That's more of a Roman Western world symbol. Nor is Easter a derivative of Ishtar. The word itself is not. I was finally able to find an ancient goddess and gods reference book that helped me with this. The etymology, that's the word that basically means the lineage of a word. It's history. What did the word come from? How did it start? Where was it first used? The etymology of Easter is Latin in origin, and it's connected with a new rising of the sun and new birth and rebirth and these ideas. So it's got pagan origins in itself, but it's not necessarily a pagan word. It's definitely not connected to Ishtar. I used to think it was. I was wrong. But like I said, stick with me. So a lot of people get to this point and they say, well, the claim is wrong. Well, not so fast. The problem is looking at the name and the symbology is the wrong approach. I want us to start here. Let me pop myself out of here for just a minute. Put me back in here. Y'all know I've brought this up with me a lot. This is one of, outside of the Bible, the actual scriptures, this is one of the most important books that I ask believers to read. So what does this one do? Excuse me. What's this book do? This book puts you back in the spiritual world of the ancients. And it shows you in your scriptures and it tells you in their culture. And it puts you back in the sandals of a first century Hebrew, not necessarily Jew, but one of the 12 tribes, 13 tribes. And it's a case of, hey, yeah, dude, the spirit world's real, you know? So that's an important book. And like I put up here for you, it says it does an excellent job of reminding believers that the spirit world is very, very real. Typo there. And that we are in a spiritual battle with spiritual beings described in the Hebrew as Elohim gods. These are the principalities spoken of in Ephesians 6. Charlie, get ready. We're going to get you to add in here for a minute. Ephesians 6:12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. Now, we are very blessed today to have somebody who studies the Hebrew language with us. Charlie, say hi to the camera, brother.
Oh, hi. I threw a comment up here. I think she's ahead of the lesson plan today, but I just thought I'd throw that up there from Mary.
Okay. Elohim. We have a lot of people who I've run into, as soon as I tell them Elohim means gods in our English language, they tell me, well, you're a blasphemer. You're saying there's more than one God in the scriptures. Would you please take a moment and explain to the audience that the word that we translate as God into English is used in this Hebrew Bible to refer to more than just Yahweh?
Absolutely.
Run with it, Charlie.
Well, the actual singular root of that word is El. And El, just simply translated as best we can in English, is just mighty one. And in the Bible, most of the times it is used in the plural form Elohim. The heme ending it indicates a plural. And many scholars, they refer to it as a majestic plural, especially when it's being used to refer to Yahweh. However, Elohim is used throughout the Old Testament to refer to pagan deities, and it's even applied to men in certain circumstances. Mm-hmm. Moshe, or Moses, as you might know him, was referred to as an Elohim, and some of the judges were referred to as Elohim.
Even Satan, I believe, or Satan.
I'm not sure of that one. I'd have to check.
But he would be Elohim.
But it would be an appropriate use of the word, yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to bounce you back out there, Charlie. Thank you very much for your help there. All right, folks. So I'm going to put us back into the show that we were doing here, the slideshow, and understand that this book will help you with that. Heiser explains all of the stuff that Charlie just went through in a little bit more detail, because Heiser reads biblical Hebrew and Greek like you and I read English. Well, he did. He just recently passed away last month, I think. But he'll get you back into that mindset. And you have to understand that there is a spiritual war going on behind us. That's the principalities in Ephesians. And Ephesians is referencing back to the book of Daniel. You know, the prince of Greece, the prince of Persia, the prince who is to come. Those are all spirit beings. So you're fighting a very real war. And Ishtar is as real as Yeshua, Jesus, and Yahweh, God. They're real. Now, that might not necessarily be the demon's actual name or the fallen angel's name. It's one of the names they go by. They go by many names, but it's real. And it's in your scriptures, and your scriptures count it as real. That book will help you with that. So we continue. So we have to understand we're dealing with spirit battle here. The next step is to remember Yahweh's commandment to the Israelites upon entering the promised land. This is very important. A lot of people will tell you, today, Old Testament's done away with. Oh, no, it's not. So Deuteronomy 12, verses 1 through 4. These are the statutes and the judgments which you shall carefully follow in the land which the Lord, which Yahweh, the Elohim, or God of your fathers, has given you to possess as long as you live in the earth. You shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations whom you are going to dispossess serve their gods, on the high mountains, on the hills, under every leafy tree. And you shall tear down the altars and smash their memorial stones to pieces and burn their Asherim in the fire and cut to pieces the carved images of their gods. You shall eliminate their names from this place. You shall not act this way toward your Elohim, your God, toward Yahweh. Okay. That is a command for the Israelites going into the promised land. Now, I'm going to pop back out of here for a moment. I want to get a hold of something real quick for you. There's concept studies in the Old Testament that a lot of us ignore or don't even know we should be doing. This is all connected to Easter, so stick with me, folks. One of the concepts is what do we mean by Hebrew and Israel? Israel especially. Israel can get you very confused if you're not paying attention to the context. Israel is a single character in the Bible. Jacob's name is changed to Israel. Why? Because he struggled with or contended with Elohim, Yahweh. Struggles with El. How's that go? I think Charlie muted his mic. It's Israel. It's a compound word, isn't it, Charlie? Hold on just a second. Just leave your mic on, Charlie. If you bleed over today, it's no big problem. So Israel, the Hebrew meaning. I got to pop him in here.
Actually, you don't have to pop me in. My sound works. But
okay, go ahead.
Israel literally means to struggle with God.
Yeah, struggle with Elohim.
Yes.
Okay. So Jacob becomes Israel. The Hebrew people form the nation of Israel. That's like, but a lot of times we think that that's the nation and the people. They're not always the same in the context of the Bible. Now, that commandment that we just read, telling Israel not to do things the way the pagans did, that was given to the people of Israel. What today we might think of as spiritual Israel. We're not getting into replacement theology. That's bad theology. What we're talking about is all those who struggle with Israel. You have to remember, Israel's not a nation yet when this command is given. And Israel has a lot of what we would think of as Gentiles with them. If you read Exodus, a lot of Gentiles came out of Egypt with the Hebrews. They all left together. So at this point, this command, Yahweh's talking with everybody who's going to follow him. So if you're a Christian and you consider yourself grafted in, you're Israel. You're not part of the nation of Israel, but you're part of what we would refer to as the spiritual Israel. You're struggling with Yahweh. You're trying to work out your own salvation. This commandment, everything I just went through is important because this commandment does not have an expiration date. It was not changed with the new covenant like a lot of people think it was. It is still in force. Today, we are not to worship Yahweh, God, in the ways that the pagans worship their gods. That's where we start finding problems with Easter as we celebrate it today. So we're going to get back into our slideshow here, if the computer will bear with me. And we're going to go to the next slide. Now, this one hopefully is a little easier for you to see, but this is the golden calf. And what this picture is representing is that Aaron thought he was worshiping Yahweh, even said so. They made the calf, said, hey, behold, Israel, your God, your Elohim who brings you out of Egypt, points to the bull. Well, that's the way the Canaanites were in the northern part of the Holy Lands. That's the way the Canaanites worship. They're commanded not to do it this way. And this is why they got in trouble. They were worshiping Yahweh. They even just said, okay, we're going to have a feast to Yahweh. But they were doing it the wrong way. And Yahweh nearly destroyed them. he did kill a whole bunch of them that day. You know, if it weren't for Moses, he was going to wipe them out and start all over. There is a high price to be paid for worshiping Yahweh in the wrong way. That's where the Easter thing is a problem for both Jew and Christian alike. We'll get to that. So, Deuteronomy 12, verses 1 through 4. Let's go back to that again. I just want to focus on the part I've got highlighted here in yellow. And burn their Asherim in the fire. What the heck is an Asherim? I know a lot of Christians don't read the Old Testament. Big mistake. Who is Asherah in the Bible? That statue is an Asherim. It's a wooden pole. That is a representation of Ishtar, as the Canaanites knew her. That is a Hebrew cutting down the Asherah pole, destroying the pagan symbols of worship to this false goddess, Ishtar. And we're commanded in the scriptures to not do this. Now, that little book you see right there on the screen, the Dictionary of the Deities and Demons in the Bible. Okay. If you want to have a little fun today, go to Amazon. Look this up in Amazon. You'll understand what I'm holding in my hand when you see the price tag on this sucker. This is the dictionary referenced by Dr. Michael Heiser and most other good biblical scholars dealing with deities and demons. I'm going to read through it real quick. I've highlighted a couple of pages. When you open it up and you look up Ashtoreth, oh, she's connected to the goddess Astarte. Now, they're all the same goddess. You get different names depending on what country you are in. So then I go and I looked up Astarte. And oh my gosh, in Acadia, her name is Ishtar. Astra is Ishtar. That dictionary will trace the lineage of every god, goddess, pagan god, scriptural god, demon, any name that's in your Bible. That dictionary traces their etymology. It traces their history, where they come from, where their names are all connected to, all the different names. So on page 106, like I told you, Ashtoreth linked to Astarte. Then you go to page 109, Astarte is linked to Ishtar in the Akkadian. Ashtoreth is Ishtar, and she's connected to Baal. All right. It's in your links, your show notes for today. Let me give you a quick little history here. In the Babylonian, in the eastern section, when you trace Ishtar, because she's even got another name that's even older than Ishtar, but Ishtar's the one most of the ancient Near East knows her by. She has this consort, or whatever. She tends to be married to Baal or Bel. She's also connected to Venus, and she's called the morning god and the evening god, because Venus can be seen at both times, at night, just as the sun's going down, just as the sun's coming up. If she's married to Baal in Babylon and Assyria and all of that, she's the sun goddess, and it's Bel. Instead of Baal, in that part of the world, he's going to be called Bel, and he's the moon god. If she's in Canaanites, like the part that's, where the Israelites are going to be settling in, if you're in that part of the world back then, she's the moon goddess, and Baal is the sun god. This gets confusing. I understand. It's taken me a long time to sort some of this stuff out. But the moon god and the sun god are constant thorns in the side of the people of Israel, the Hebrews. They always go back to tripping up with them and chasing after them. You're going to see this in a few minutes. I've got this for you today. It's part of the idolatry cycle that Israel keeps falling into. And it's why they were scattered into the world, because they kept falling into that idolatry cycle. So, little quick rabbit. We're going to jump back over to Arabia, Babylon and Assyria and all of that, what we would think of as the Middle East today. Jump back into that part, and you're going to go way back 2, 3, 4,000 years. In that part of the world, she's the sun goddess. She's married to the moon god. In that case, it's not Baal, it's Bel. Same spelling, just different vowel pronunciations. If you start researching Islam, you're going to find that Allah is Bel. All of this is connected. Remember, Islam is an apostate religion. It starts with the Bible and goes way, way wrong. It's not a pagan religion. It's an apostate religion, meaning bad teachings, morphs the real one true God. Why did I bring that up? It's connected to the subject today. Easter is very similar to what happened with the Israelites in ancient times, where they chase after pagan gods and put those practices into their worship of Yahweh. The Hebrews, the Jews and whatever, they did it. We're doing it today. The Muslims have done it. That's the point right now. All right, back into our slideshow. Okay, what else do we know about Ishtar? This section here comes from one of the links that I have in your show notes for you today. At some point in time today, I'll probably bring this up and we'll look through it. But it says Ishtar in the Akkadian area and Inanna, Sumerian. I told you Ishtar has an older name, Inanna. That goes way back. It says there are different names of the same Mesopotamian goddess. She was the undisputed queen of heaven. Hold on to that. No other goddess in any culture even came close to matching her prowess. She was originally the goddess of the storehouse, and the fertility associated with it became the goddess in charge of giving kings their authority, and in later days was the goddess of war, passion, and prostitutes. She was, as Inanna, portrayed as a virginal daughter and an eager young bride. Then as Ishtar, characterized by her long list of disastrous relationships, and detailed in the Gilgamesh epic, where he lists her multiple paramours who came to bad ends. Her famous marriage to Dumuzi, also known as Tammuz, we're going to return to that, under the name Inanna, and sometimes portrayed in kind tones, in a good way. And when he is killed, Tammuz is killed by brigands, whatever, ruffians, who club him over the head and steal his livestock. And sometimes in brutal tones, when she contacts demons to steal him away from the underworld in order to take her place after, unsuccessfully trying to steal the underworld throne from her sister. She either helps her sister, different stories. We'll quit there for a moment. Why is this important? Joe, you're confusing me. Why are you bringing this up? 2 points. The first one we're going to go into right now is she is the queen of heaven throughout the whole Middle East. Ishtar is the queen of heaven. She's a fertility goddess. So if I go into the future, into a different culture, and I'm into a culture where eggs and rabbits are connected to fertility, and you're chasing after a pagan goddess, and you're using those practices and those symbols to make your Christian faith more palatable to the pagans you're trying to convert, you start mixing things, or you start marrying the pagans into your religious group, and their wives or whatever start bringing their practices in. That's exactly what happened to Solomon, or what's the Hebrew, Shlomo. Yeah. All right. So that's what happened to Solomon. The Hebrews were told, don't do that, because you won't make the Canaanites into good Hebrews, good followers of Yahweh. They'll lead you astray in reverse, and you'll end up chasing after false gods. This is all connected today. And I know I'm giving you a lot. I'll wrap it up as the day goes on. Stick with me. I'm putting a lot of pieces in play. We're juggling the parts. Got to get them all into the juggle stream before I can start making the picture for you. Queen of Heaven's the one we're going to touch on at the moment. What does that have to do with the Bible or Easter? Well, here we go. For some reason, I can't see all of that. Oh, well. So one of the things I was studying, looked at Molech worship. This is from that article I told you about. He was researching Molech worship from the vantage point of the emperor cult and cult prostitute in the light of this week's Torah portion. So he's reading about Torah, the author of this article. And then I stumbled upon this by accident, and it was way too cool not to dig into and explore and share. And this is how I end up learning most of the things I do, the way this author does, by accident, because he's reading in other areas. Here's what he reads. This is from ancient Akkadian. This is a hymn to Ishtar. It says, "O Ishtar, merciful goddess, I have come to visit you. I have prepared for you an offering, pure milk, a pure cake baked in ashes. It's known as a kamanu tumri. I stood up for you, a vessel for libation. Hear me and act favorably towards me." So, in other words, in this song, they bake her an ash cake and they give her some wine or something, a drink offering. Okay. Down at the bottom, he says, "What is a kamanu tumri?" If I'm pronouncing that correctly, it says, "It is a thin, unleavened loaf of fine flour baked in ashes, literally called an ash cake, as opposed to bread made in formal ovens. Tumra bread is made on the go in haste. In fact, it is still made by Arabs to this day." Now, he's got number one there. He cites this. If you go to your homework in your show notes, you'll find this article. You'll be able to see his references to all of this. He's providing you with the receipts. It says, "What is a pure cake? I believe that calling it a pure cake would probably be a reflection of the fact that it hasn't had time to become leavened. It's not risen yet." So he goes on. He says, that was not immediately a game changer for him. But then he gets to Jeremiah 7:18. Trust me, folks, you're now smacking the world of Ishtar, and you are smacking the world of Passover and Easter. It may not seem like it, but you are now, and you're connected to Ishtar. It says, the children, this is the Bible here. This is book of Jeremiah, verse 18. "The children gather wood, the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead dough to make cakes," actually kawanamim or whatever, "for the queen of heaven. And they pour out drink offerings to other gods to provoke me to anger." This is Yahweh speaking through Jeremiah. He cites it there. It says Kawanaim is a loan word derived from the Akkadian kamanu. And the only other place where we see it in scripture is Jeremiah 44, verse 19. It says, "And the women said, indeed, we will go on making offerings to the queen of heaven and pouring out libations to her. Do you think that we made cakes for her marked with her image and poured out libations to her without a husband being involved?" And he finds up, he says, in context, Jeremiah 44 concerns the return of the Jews to the worship of the queen of heaven as they feel they had been cursed since abandoning her. All right, what's going on there? That is very simple. They've left Babylon, coming back to the home world. They don't know how to do Passover correctly. That's in the book of, what's it, Ezra and Nehemiah, Charlie? They're trying to relearn it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
I have to check that myself.
So they're trying to relearn the ways of how to do Passover. Some of these people, it's not an easy time for them coming back to the Holy Lands, the Promised Lands. So some of the people did then exactly like they did after Exodus. They wanted to go back to Egypt. It was too tough. I want to go back to Egypt. You brought me out here to die, Moses. Oh, this is too tough returning to the Holy Lands. Let's go back to worshiping Ishtar, the queen of heaven. It's right there in your Bible. You just don't know the cultural background. So when the Bible says queen of heaven, you don't know we're talking about Ishtar or Ashtoreth because we don't always know the names. So Ishtar is connected to this, and not just at Passover. She was a goddess that they offered up to all year long. They made the Ashtoreth poles to worship her. It's kind of like a totem pole to their goddess. But she is, notice that they're cooking unleavened bread for her in haste. Very similar parallel to the Exodus story. Now, a lot of scholars today who don't believe in the Bible will say, look, this all proves that the Israelites just took everything from the other nations around them and made up their own religion, that Yahweh in the Bible is all just made up. No. That's why I keep suggesting you read the Unseen Realm. What's going on here is it started out correctly the way Moses writes. And then these other Elohim, these other rebellious spirits were put in charge of the nations, and they taught the nations wrong. So they took Yahweh's way. They took God's correct ways, morphed them, taught the people under their authority, king of Persia, king of Greece, taught them wrong. These other spirit beings taught the people to worship the spirit being rather than Yahweh, rather than God. And that's what actually happened. So Moses has to come back and set everything right again. So all the scholars who think that the Bible steals everything from the world around it in ancient times, they haven't gone back far enough. They haven't done their scholarly due diligence. And they haven't accepted the Bible on its terms. You have to do that before you can go attacking the Bible's argument. You got to attack it on its terms. Otherwise, it's bad logic, bad reasoning. So what we have here, we have biblical evidence that Ishtar was a thorn in the side for Yahweh's people when they move into the promised land. They've come out of the Exodus. They've done their 40 years in the desert. They're going into the promised land. Ishtar is going to become a problem for them. So is Baal, and so is Moloch or Moloch. Why do I mention those three? They tend to go hand in hand with each other. And before today's over, we're going to talk about a little book that's rocking Charlie's world right now. And you're going to learn about Ishtar in a way that you haven't seen yet. So let's get back into here. Okay, the author of that article that I have, and it's linked, he concludes, in the end, a pagan offering requires a pagan target and a pagan intent. Form and function working together for the specific purpose of drawing near to another deity. Just as a quick note, form and function defined, right? Where have you heard that before? See, I'm not the only one that thinks this way. Nothing offered to a pagan god was, in and of itself, pagan, but shaping or stamping a flat, unleavened cake with an image of Ishtar and then purposely offering it up to her, yeah, that's pagan. It says context and intent change everything, and they especially change how we read and interpret the Bible. My comment under here is, but is the author correct? Scripture would suggest the answer, at least in a case such as this, is no. Remember, they were worshiping Yahweh. They were using pagan ways, but they thought they were worshiping Yahweh, and they were in their mind. Their intent was to worship the one true God. They did it wrong, and it almost got them all killed. So our author here is wrong, is mistaken toward Yahweh worship. Okay. This is a touchy subject, a touchy issue. It's difficult and it's confusing. And here's where I want to take a moment to see if I can do some good work here. Well-meaning, Bible-believing people. Dr. Michael Heiser. So he writes this book and he tells you that there are polemics in the Bible, like Yahweh rides the clouds. That's Baal language. And where you find those passages is in the prophets. Yahweh's taking pagan imagery and applying it to himself. In this sense, Yahweh is attacking those pagan gods. It's spiritual warfare. He's saying, no, you don't control the thunder. I do. Heck, I created it. So he's stealing their imagery. The 10 plagues in Egypt, similar thing. It's an attack on the Egyptian gods. So Heiser thinks because Yahweh did that, speaking through his prophets, Yahweh does that. It's okay for humans to do that same thing too. So I can take pagan practices, turn them around and point them toward Christian worship. There was a time when I believed that too. Okay. Sharky asks, what I think about it is it possible that when you take a pagan practice and name it into your life and over your children, does that give the evil behind those practices the right to invade them? In ancient mindset thinking, Sharky, yeah, I think it does. And that's what I'm addressing right now. There's a big difference between whether or not Yahweh grabs a pagan image and turns it on its head and points it to himself and us. We're not Yahweh. We don't have that liberty. We don't set the rules. So unless Yahweh has specifically told us it's okay for us to do something in worship of him, then we shouldn't be doing that. We should stick to the way he told us to worship him. That's where Easter becomes a problem, because we have adopted not only different day, which we'll cover tomorrow. Was Easter a Passover meal? Oh, Charlie wants to be involved in this one tomorrow. We're going to have a really cool discussion tomorrow because we're going to address this issue, today's subject, from the Jewish Hebrew type perspective of Passover. Be a lot of scripture tomorrow. But you're going to find that a lot of the things that have invaded Easter, the Christian celebration of the crucifixion and resurrection, same things have invaded the Passover meal. There's no egg commanded in Passover in the Bible. And yet if you have a Seder meal, there's an egg there. That's the same fertility symbol creeping into the Jewish practice. And tomorrow is the day where we'll talk about exactly what Passover is, what it pointed to, and how that's connected to Easter. But today we're looking at Easter and pagan practices that have come into it. The Catholic Church and the Council of Nicaea or whatever, they decided to change the day. So they moved it to the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox, isn't it? I think that's a pagan practice in and of itself. Pagans keep time by the sun. Hebrews keep time by the moon. Yahweh commanded his people, you keep time by the moon. The pagans keep it by the sun. So not only did the Christian church change the day, they changed the way they count time. Remember, the prince who is to come is going to try and change the times and the days. Well, we think times means calendar. No. Appointed times, the Sabbaths, the Moedim, how you set your calendar, all the things Yahweh said to count and keep. He tries to change. He, the prince who is to come, being another one of those spiritual demons or fallen angels, can try and change the law. Well, Torah teaches us how to keep Passover. And by Torah, I mean the teachings. I don't mean necessarily the law of Moses. And what happens is we come along and we change the whole way we do Easter. And we even change when we have what the Christian church calls it the Lord's Supper. Well, if that's a Passover supper, you don't get to have that whenever the heck you want to, like a lot of churches do. It's for a specific period in time in the calendar, in the Hebrew calendar. This is why I said it's not about just the rabbit and the egg and Ishtar being eaten. No. That's the wrong approach. And I did not realize that for a while. I figured all this out late last night when I was putting this class together. It finally dawned on me. Wrong approach, Joe. What's the approach? Look at the pattern in the Old Testament. Remember, patterns. Patterns are a big deal in this class. What's the pattern in the Old Testament? Ishtar worship creeps into God's people and the Yahweh's people in the way they worship him. And he eventually has to destroy them for it. He divorces the northern tribes, the divorced bride, the house of Israel, and he almost destroys the southern tribes. Eventually, they both get disbanded into the world because of their pagan ways. They will not worship him the way he commanded. They keep wanting to do it their way, or they keep chasing after false gods. In the Christian church today, we are doing this in the Easter's practice, in the practices of Easter. We're worshiping Yahweh and his son the wrong way. That's a sin according to the Bible. Hey, I got at least one brother of mine who watches this show. He's a pastor, Christian pastor, Protestant. I get it. We talk. Love that man. And I'm pretty sure he's not going to be comfortable with today's class. But at the same time, you will never find any permission in the New or Old Testament to do what we're doing with Easter. You won't. It's not there. So when you add to Yahweh's ways of doing things, you will stumble across the condemnation that Moses gave us. Do not add or take away from these teachings. So when we do that, that's when we cross the same line that the ancient Hebrews and Jews did. If you cross the line they did, expect the same punishment they got. Yahweh is Yahweh. He does not change. It's constant as the northern star. If he treats us differently in this epoch as he did back then, he's unjust because he said he won't change. Just quoting scripture for you, folks. All right, back to the egg and the bunnies. The egg and the rabbit are symbols of fertility in the West. Adding them to the celebration of Easter is a direct connection to pagan worship of the fertility gods, not just Ishtar, There are more than one. But in the ancient world, Ishtar is the most prevalent. This would seem to place Easter firmly in the crosshairs of Yahweh's command not to worship him in the ways of the pagans. And he wouldn't and won't address the move from Passover. He won't. Okay, we haven't. I'm sorry. It's having a hard time reading the screen where I'm at, folks. We still have a few issues here in the background. We haven't and won't in this show today. In the show today, we are not going to address the move from Passover. That's tomorrow's show. I mean, we've done it, but we're not going to explain it. Passover is commanded. Easter isn't. And we're going to look at the timing to the solstice in more detail tomorrow. This is another practice with pagan roots added to the Christian community. We will deal with Passover and its timing on tomorrow's show. I already got that slide in there. I'm ahead of my own lesson plan a little bit. But now's when Charlie needs to get his mic on and get ready to rock and roll. So we're going to pop into Charlie here in just a second. I want to look at this book again. Return of the Gods by Jonathan Cahn. If you're looking for a fairly quick read, fairly easy read, or listen, and you're a believer, and you want proof that you are currently living in a time where the gods are back being in charge of everything, and we're chasing after them, this is the book for you, my friend. And what I'm going to do here for a moment is I'm going to give Charlie the air for the next 15 minutes if he wants that much time. And I want him just to share what he's running into with this book, because Ishtar is addressed. Charlie, share with the class what you're running into.
Well, it started with the unseen realm that Joe's talked about. I do recommend reading that one first.
Yes.
And then following that, Return of the Gods by Jonathan Cahn. And then The Oracle.
We'll get to the Oracle later.
Yeah. But Return of the Gods, even if you don't take the scriptures into account, just looking at what Jonathan brings out about how the United States has turned from its original roots to where we are today, it's all there. I mean, and the way he ties it together, and what I really love about Jonathan Cahn is you go to the back of the book and he's got everything footnoted.
Yes.
And he backs up everything that he says. And they're easy reads. They're kind of dialogue throughout most of the book. But oh my gosh, to see how, we say today, oh, we don't bow down and worship gods like they did in the Old Testament. Well, yes and no. We might not physically bow down to an image. However, go to Wall Street. And what do you see right outside of Wall Street?
A bull.
There is a bronze bull or bronze calf.
And that represents who?
That represents Baal.
Mm-hmm. And he's the god of work and magnifying, produce.
Yes, gain.
Gain. Yes, he's the god of gain.
Yes, he's the god of gain. And just recently, a statue of Astra was put up in New York City.
Yep.
And
that's Ishtar.
So that's Ishtar. So we have these coming right into our nation and replacing the Ten Commandments,
mm-hmm.
the images of Moshe, and, the images of, it's everything that we were founded upon. Because if you look at like the Supreme Court building, there is an image of Moshe in the central
Moses
place. Yeah, Moses, sorry. I speak Hebrew, so sorry about that. But that's been replaced, and the Ten Commandments have been taken out of not only the schools but out of our public buildings and such.
We're dealing with Ishtar today, and we were dealing with that Christian school shooting yesterday with person, the guy who thinks he's a girl, or the girl rather who thinks she's a guy. That's connected to Ishtar, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh.
She's the goddess of sexual
She
ambiguity.
is the goddess of transformation.
Yes, and her
And
priests used to dress
they,
up in drag, in
yes,
as transvestites, in as
and
female clothing.
and they were surgically altered.
Yep.
They were eunuchs.
And they paraded around
And
in
they,
the colors of the rainbow.
yes, I mean, it's all there. It's all back, and it's all back with a vengeance.
So
It's 100 times worse than it was back in the Old Testament days. But we think today, oh, we're so much better than that.
we're
No, we're
blind to
not.
it, so
We
she's
are
in a free
blind to it,
reign
and
now.
she is just going bonkers. And just look at our world, how upside down it is. You know, Joe's talking about, he's apologizing for misgendering someone. I mean, what's up with that? I've got a weird voice on the phone and probably through this microphone that we're on here. And when I was in the military, I got misgendered all the time on the phone. I just ignored it, and
Roz.
people would usually, when they figured it out, they'd apologize to me. I'm like, I don't care, it's fine, But it's just crazy.
All right, man. Well, I want to read a few things to the audience real quick before we go to our break. So I'm going to pop you out of there, Charlie. But you can keep your mic live and join in if you want. Jonathan Cahn's book on page 77, it says the Enchantress returns, Mrs. Baal. So he'll go over and talk to you about how she was married to Baal and the Baal Ashtoreth connection. We've already seen that in the Bible. Ishtar and the sexual revolution here in this country. She's also a sorceress. She's into drugs. Do we have a drug problem in this country? She does not like marriage. Khan takes you back into the old texts and shows you some of the Akkadian inscriptions to her prayers and songs to Ishtar. He cites, like Charlie was saying, he cites all of this. She's dedicated to sex. She's into the destruction of marriage. Let's see. She likes Hollywood sanctification of forbidden. I'm looking at a few of the other things that a few of the things that Khan goes into for you that he pointed out. She's into transformation. She's into I am a man and I am a woman. That's actually in some of her songs and prayers where she claims to be man and woman. She likes to change them back and forth. She calls, for those of you who listen to Freedom with Steve Nichols, Steve likes to call these folks who think that they can change their biological sex. He calls them transformers. That's the same word that Jonathan Cahn uses in his book for this. And he says that Ishtar's the goddess of transforming. Then the most important part, he will go into an event in New York called Stonewall. This is where the LBGT, whatever, the gay agenda really got ripping and roaring in this country. You need to let him walk you through that event, the timing, the characters, the days, and everything that's going on there. And it is all Ishtar worship, and it all goes back to ancient timing and ancient practices. This is not to be ignored if you follow God, Yahweh. If your dedication is to El Elyon, God Most High, Yahweh, the God of the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this stuff shall not be ignored. This is crucial to your salvation, because these return of these gods, they are creeping into our churches. If you've got anybody supporting the LGBT or whatever, you're worshiping, you've got Ishtar into your church. If you invite the demon in, you've just given him reign in your church. Do not expect the protection of the Holy Spirit if you invite his enemies in to your sanctuary. Expect him to leave. If you're defending abortion, you're into Moloch worship. If you're into money and manna or the worship of mighty men, remember, Ishtar is a political goddess as well. So be careful what you do with Trump, folks. If he's your representative, okay, but don't make him out to be a savior, because you're going to cross the line into Baal and Ishtar worship in the process. You can find yourself accidentally worshiping pagan gods through not meaning to do so. That's part of what's happened here with Easter. The egg and the rabbit, those are connected to other pagan deities in the Greek and Roman world. And it's just the Greek and Roman variations of, Ishtar. They just have different symbols of fertility there. Other things, I told you we'd come back to Tammuz, her husband. In one of the stories of Ishtar, he dies, and she goes into the underworld and to rescue him, to bring him back out of the underworld, bring him back to life. She gets killed. And in the story, she resurrects herself. And does that rhyme in your head here, connecting with Easter? She resurrects herself, comes back to life. And before she goes and does that, she weeps over Tammuz, and she forces everybody to weep and mourn with her for 40 days. There's Lent, because it's mourning. It's 40 days of depravity. And by depravity, I mean deprivation, rather. You're depriving yourself of something. That's the connection to Lent, because you will not find that 40-day connection in the Bible that way. In the Bible, 40 is connected more toward the years in the desert, to where you perfect yourself and you come ready to be a ruler again. 40 is the year then a king is supposed to, be coronated. 40 is the year, the age David's coronated. When they're yelling at Yeshua right before Passion Week, they say, you can't be king yet. You're not yet 40 years old. So the number 40 in the Bible is connected to something different. In the pagan world, it's connected to the mourning for Tammuz. All of these things creep into our religion today. Well-meaning. You heard me. Well-meaning. We think it's not a big deal. I get it. I'm not condemning anyone. I'm educating. What you do with this is up to you. You got to figure out what it means to you. So when we come back, I'm going to walk you through some of the articles that I brought up. One of them is a modern day article telling you how to worship Ishtar. And it's serious. It's not a spoof. It's not satire. They're worshiping Ishtar today. She's one of the goddesses that Yahweh specifically said would be a thorn in our side forever. Wherever Israel is, the Canaanites will be a thorn in their side forever until everything is made new again. And if you've been in any of my classes where I told you about the prophecies of Ephraim and the northern kingdom, the house of Israel, they are not Jews. They are Hebrews. The Bible says so, not me. They're Hebrews, not Jews. Jews is the house of Judah, the tribe of Judah, the half tribe of Benjamin, the half tribe of the Levites. When you think house of Israel, it might help for us today to think Samaritans, although that's not exactly correct either, because in the biblical times when Yeshua was here walking the earth, Samaritans were 90% foreigners. They weren't Hebrew culture lineage, but there were still about 10% of the population still were Hebrews. I know it's a confusing thing. We'll have to go over it in very slow, painstaking detail very soon. But the point here is we have, through well-intentioned, thinking we're doing good, Aaron thought he was doing a good thing when he made the bull. And hey, look, Israel, your God, Yahweh, who brought you out of Egypt. Let's have a feast to him. Pointed to the bull. Almost got himself killed. Almost got the whole group of people killed because he did it wrong. If you think that that's, we're under grace now. You were under grace back then too. If you read your Old Testament, the Tanakh, it tells you you're under grace. Even in the Old Testament. You were saved by faith. Abraham was justified by his faith. It's all explained in the Old Testament. We just don't read it anymore. We think that all of the warnings and all of the curses and all the commands not to do things the way we're doing them today, we think that's all behind us. It's not what Yeshua said. It's not what Jesus said. If you don't believe me, you go read the Gospel of John very carefully and read John's pastoral letters very carefully. In there, John and Jesus both tell you, if you're not obeying my commands, you have no part of me. I don't know you. You're not in the love of me or the Father. Well, he's the living Torah. If you think the New Testament's gone, Jesus is gone, because that's who he is. There is no New Testament at the time. He's talking about the Tanakh, the old. See, these are important things for us to get right, because the spiritual prince who wants to tear us apart, he came to change the Torah and the appointed times that Yahweh told us to keep, to honor, to not forget. We can't do that. We've got to guard them. We got to hold on to them the best we can, the best we can understand them this many years removed. So one of the things we can dang sure do is we can get rid of those eggs and bunnies, and we can focus just on the crucifixion and the resurrection. Now that, there's no biblical basis anywhere for that. So that's a good start. While we are doing more research into this for ourselves, to prove to ourselves what is and isn't real. I've been doing this now for 3 or 4 years. I'm sharing with you what I've learned. When you read Jonathan Cahn's book, several of the reference books he cites, I don't expect you to have them. They're expensive. They're sitting on my counter at home, on my bookshelves at home. This is one of them. Like I said, if you want to know what I mean by expensive, go to Amazon during the break and look up the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. You'll understand what I mean, that I don't expect you to have that on your shelf. But as a teacher of Yahweh's people, I have to have these things. So when Jonathan Cahn said this book, I looked over and, oh, I got that one. Pulled it down, opened it up. Yeah, says exactly what he said it would. I wasn't able to check everything he's got because I don't own all those books, but a lot of them. All right, let me see if I can do this, Charlie. Break time. We'll come back in just a few minutes. I'm going to hit it and see if I can make it work. Hold on. I bumped out of it. We're going to try this one more time. Hold on. Hit the break music there, Charlie. think we're back. We're still working out a few little bugs here. I got a question up on the screen here. Charlie threw it up for me from Road Dog. It says, how is this all connected to CERN? Road Dog, I'm going to assume you're talking about the super collider, the accelerator. If I'm misunderstanding you, please correct me. But if you're talking about CERN, the super collider opening up different windows in rifts and dimensions and stuff like that, that's not going to connect any of this. That's going to be that'd be more in the realm of Return of the Gods and the deception of our national leaders, when the pit is opened and Satan and his demons are allowed to go deceive the world, the nations rather. That's a different conversation, my friend, if I have your question correct. Now, I think Charlie answered Julie's question, and I think I'm having to slow myself down here, according to Marianne. Doing the best I can with that. I tend to think faster than I should, and it makes me talk too fast. I'm working on this. We have Charlie here. This is one of the blessings of the show today. This is why we're working on this. If you have questions, please. The phone doesn't work today. It's Wednesday. We don't have it plugged in. I know the number's up there, but we don't have the phone plugged in today. We don't need Dodo Cop disrupting today's show. So type your comments in or email them to us. And Charlie will help answer that stuff. And if it's something that he thinks I need to have thrown to me, he'll throw it to me. So keep up with us there. What I'm going to do now is bump us back into the last of our slide presentation I had. Then I'm going to share some of the stories with you that I brought up. I'll walk you through them. So what else is there about Ishtar that might be connected to Easter? Is the resurrection connected to Ishtar? Yes. Remember, I told you in one of her stories, she goes to the underworld, Sheol or whatever, Hades. She dies and she resurrects herself. There's the Lent connection, was that her mourning over her dead husband Tammuz, one of her, well, not really husband, consort, because she's the goddess of prostitutes and she acts like them too. Has Ishtar returned? We were talking about that in the book. Does any of this matter? Well, I'd tell you, yes, it does, but that's just me. How the heck did I do this? I don't know how I messed that text up. I got a feeling that happened after I edited it. I apologize, but this is Mark 7, verses 7 through 13. And it says, and in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. Neglecting the commandment of Yahweh, you hold the traditions of men. He was also saying, that's Yeshua talking, and he's quoting the Old Testament, and in which case it means he's quoting himself. He says, he was also saying to them, you are experts at setting aside the commandment of Yahweh in order to keep your traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and the one who speaks evil of a father or mother is certainly to be put to death. But you say, if a person says to his father or his mother, whatever I have that would help you is now korban, that is a gift to Yahweh, you no longer allow him to do anything for his father or mother, thereby invalidating the word of God or Yahweh by your traditions, which you have handed down, and you may do such things such as this. When I was telling you earlier, you've got to be careful to worship Yahweh Yahweh's way. Worship God the way God tells us to worship him. That's what Yeshua, Jesus, is telling the Pharisees right there in that passage. He's saying, yeah, you think you're worshiping God, but you're doing it your way. You're worshiping Yahweh your way. Yeshua, Jesus, he's condemning them for that. He's telling them right there, publicly, in the temple, that pretty much they're sinning. They're sinning in the name of God, because since they're teachers and priests, sinning in the name of Yahweh. He condemns this for this in other parts of the scripture. He says they are sons of Satan, sons of Satan, and that they're all going to Hades, hell. What did they do? They just changed the way they worship Yahweh. And what happens? Jesus, in the flesh, eye to eye, condemns them for it. I understand there are a lot of people like, oh, I like my Easter tradition. Jesus was saying, you guys like your traditions. And that's what he's condemning the Pharisees for. He says, you like your traditions more than you like the actual word of Yahweh, your God, your Elohim. Condemned. Be careful with what you chase after. That's all I'm saying. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to take a single thing I'm telling you for the truth. All I would ask, beg you, test it for yourself before you dismiss this. If nothing else, take your Bible, open it up, and you find where you're allowed to use an egg or a rabbit in the worship of Yahweh. And you find where you're allowed to change any of Yahweh's feasts or celebrations. You say, well, Joe, this was after the resurrection and the crucifixion. We're just going to add to it because that didn't happen in the Old Testament. That's what Passover is all about from the beginning, folks. We're going to cover that tomorrow. Passover before the cross was looking forward. Passover after the crucifixion was looking backward. So when Yeshua says, do this in remembrance of me, that's because you no longer have to anticipate the Passover lamb. Messiah's here. He's done his atoning work. He's defeated death and sin. Now you look back on it. Still the same feast. We'll go over that in more detail tomorrow. So if you add a different holiday without Yahweh's authority, you're changing the word of Yahweh. Moses says, if you do this, you're going to inherit the curse. And we run around flippantly, not giving a care in the world. We're just going to do it our way. And the passage I just gave you, Pharisees, leaders of Israel, doing it their way. And there they are, face to face with Yeshua, getting condemned for it. Do you think he's changed his ways from then to now? I personally, I don't, because I don't find it anywhere in the scriptures. So that's where I ended the slide presentation. See if I can get rid of that. It won't let me dump it out. What I want to do now, give me just a moment, because this is going to take me a minute to get it up and move around. Now, what we're about to do here, we still have a little work to do in the studio. We've got things now where I can actually throw things up. Things are working better. We still have some more work to do. Some of the equipment that we're trying to use is old and inherited. Charlie was Air Force. He's used to writing a check and going and getting brand new equipment. Everything always works fine for them. I was in the Marine Corps. We get the hand-me-downs from the Army and the Air Force and the Navy, and nothing ever works, and we got to figure out how to make it work. This is a Marine Corps studio. I'm right at home. Charlie's the poor guy I got to apologize to because, he's having to come in here. And it's bad enough he's Charlie. He's already a screw-up. He was in the Air Force. He's over there stewing. But we still got to patch our equipment together, so hold with me. I'm going to bring up a screen. I will no longer be able to see the studio. So if I need any help, Charlie's going to have to talk to me. So I want to share this and I want to pop over to this screen. And I'm going to ask Charlie, does this come up okay over there?
Yeah,
Thumb up. It's up.
It's working.
All right. This is your homework. Road to Concord. Yes, I know. We need to update this. We're going to do it. Incidentally, just a real quick rabbit. Y'all understand the picture there. That's the shooting from Lexington Green. And what's in the left and the right side margins of this page? That's the prayer at the First Continental Congress. That lasted 3 hours before they even started work. And that's the prayer that John Adams wrote home to Abigail and said it was such a powerful prayer in time and such a powerful moving. He knew that their efforts to save this country from the king could not fail. He said he knew that Yahweh was with him. So that's why that picture's in the background there. So anyhow, show notes, issue. Beyond Ishtar, the tradition of eggs at Easter. I'll open that one up. We'll pop into here real quick. And this is anthropology in practice. It says, don't believe every meme you encounter. And you go through this. Now, this is not necessarily a believing website. Okay, this is probably just secular world. Make a comment on here. And what they're going to do is they're going to go through and they show you this meme that pops up all the time. And they say, it's not really true, guys. Ishtar isn't going to. And they're right. I found out they're right. But the practice of chasing after pagan symbols and putting it into your Christian worship, that's the same. That hasn't changed. We've already shown you Ishtar. They did that with Ishtar in ancient Israel. They've still done it. That's where the egg gets added to the Seder meal. Still doing it. And we do it today with Easter. So this will go through all of these things. I'm not going to read all of this for you. It shows you, teaches you a little about Ishtar. What you're going to learn is she is a very complicated goddess. So, and she's very, oh no, she's this. Oh no, she's that. She's the morning goddess, the evening goddess. No, she's the goddess of heaven. No, she's the goddess of the underworld. Yeah, she's both sides of everything. Goddess of confusion, goddess of I'm a man. No, all of that. All of that. That's who we're dealing with. So this goes through a lot of that. And you can go through this website and it gives you some decent information. But that's from a, yeah, let's not continue this Easter is, Ishtar worship stuff. I got that one. The next link I open up for you, if the computer will open it, doesn't like that one. We are having a little issue with this old computer because the one I'm working on does not like the world. Okay. How Easter replaced the biblical Passover. And this is United Church of God, Australia. If you don't like the source, fine, just move on. If you're anything like me, it means, okay, I'm going to read what you've given me, and I'm going to check the information, and I'm not going to worry too much about the messenger. Not at first. Now, if the information's got issues, then I'm going to look at the messenger. But for here, it says the Church of Jesus established, observed the biblical Passover on the 14th of Nisan for the first 200 years of existence. That's pretty much verifiable. And it was only after significant political pressure that most Christian congregations changed the date of this observance to what is now called Easter Sunday. And right here, I know Mary Ann was asking about some of this. You can go through a brief outline of how, when, who, why it was all changed. And there's, even the New Catholic Encyclopedia. And this I verified. That's why this link is here. Originally, both observances, Passover and Easter, were allowed, but gradually it was felt incongruous that Christians should celebrate Easter on a Jewish feast, and unity in celebrating the principal Christian feast was called for, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let me bounce myself out of that for a minute. Put myself back in. All right. What happens here? The Catholic Encyclopedia is going to soften and spin this a little bit. It was felt that there's anti-Semitism in the Catholic Church. And this is something that I've had to help other believers understand. Judaism is not an enemy of Christianity, and Christianity is not an enemy of Judaism. So if we're opposed to each other, we're both wrong for doing so. If you're reading the scriptures, it's supposed to be our rule book sitting over there on the corner of the shelf right there. You know what? That's one of the beauties of what we did in the studio. Hold on a minute. That's one of the reasons we did this. So if I'm going by this, scriptures tell me that there are two houses. House of Judah, who we call Jews, who are still keeping Torah. And then the house of Israel, who we call the lost tribes, and who Gentiles are grafted into, and today we call that the Christian church. And they hate each other. That's actually in prophecy. There's a prophecy that says there will come a time when Ephraim will quit hating Judah and Judah will quit hating Ephraim. We're in a period of time where that's starting to happen. That's a fulfillment of a prophecy. You better wake up, because that's an end times prophecy. Not latter days, end times prophecy. And it's been happening since the late 1800s. Charlie's reading the Oracle. I don't know if he's gotten to that point yet. But Jonathan, yep. You have?
Yeah, I just finished it this morning.
So we know back in the 1800s that the Jews and the Christians had a meeting in England where they started looking for ways to reunite the two religions, didn't they?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're in a time when this is starting to be fulfilled. We shouldn't hate each other. But it was because of anti-Semitism within the Holy Roman Catholic Church. That's in part why Easter got me. That's also why we went to Sunday worship. But now, Sunday worship, sun worship, don't think that's a boo-boo either. That's Baal worship, creeping back into the Christian church. Yes, this stuff is going to happen. Prophecy tells us it will. calls us the harlot. Those of us who are apostate religious practices, we're the harlot. We're not pagans and Gentiles. Those of us who believe but don't practice our faith correctly according to the way Yahweh told us to, we're apostates. We have left the true faith and true teachings, true religions. The question for each and every one of us as individual believers now is, you got to wrestle this out yourself with Yahweh, and you've got to work out your own salvation. Are you just going to accept the traditions of men, the things that we can trace backwards in time through history, and go, aha, there's the starting point, and it was done by men who were not prophets? If you find that, that is a tradition of men. The people who started Easter were not prophets. We know when it started. We know, in general terms, the group of people, maybe not the man or woman, but in general terms, we know when and where it started, and it was not commanded by one of Yahweh's prophets or his son or himself, which means we've got a tradition of man on our hands. Now, what you're going to do with that is up to you. I know what I'm doing with it. As soon as I know for myself that, okay, that was started by men, I've seen that passage of what Yeshua, Jesus, says to people who favor their traditions of men over the word of his Father. I got to get rid of this. It's gone. So I don't keep Easter anymore. We'll discuss Passover tomorrow. Let me hop back over here, and we will.
Because I'm seeing that there's no audio on.
I'm back, dude.
Okay.
Was I scrolling things that nobody could hear?
Apparently, because you took yourself out of studio, you dumped your audio. You've got to be in studio for your audio to go through.
My bad, folks. In general, what I was telling you real quick.
It's okay.
Nope. Charlie saved us, man.
It's my fault.
Nope.
But I'll fix it.
Charlie gets a sucker for today. He gets a, just don't throw it in the dirt, Charlie. What I was telling you, just in brief, I don't have to go through it all again, but this site here that I'm scrolling through right now, the goddess Ishtar, very good basic information. It is a good, if you're just looking for one of my links to read, this is a good basic background of who Ishtar was in the ancient times. Now, what you're looking at here, this is important. This is the gate of Ishtar. This was at the city. It's a monument to her. It's basically a temple to her, to her, gateway to her temple. These are being erected all over the world. That's why I wanted you to see this article. These are being erected all over the world. And this was built in the 1950s. So that's when, right before the Stonewall happened, which is in the Return of the Gods. So this is a good overall on Ishtar. Then there's another one here. It says, what are the difference between Easter and Ishtar? And this one will go through a lot of that as well. This is just general stuff. It brings Bible stuff back into it. We've read Jeremiah 7:18. Yes, you're going to get pounded with ads. I know that. This is the price of free blog pages. And then there's also in First Kings, we didn't read that one yet. It says, and they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it, and they called upon the name of Baal from the morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, and no one answered, and they limped around the altar that they had made. Baal is Ishtar's husband in this case, because this is dealing with the Canaanites. Here's the one page I wanted you to see. This is not a joke. This one says, how to work with the Sumerian goddess of the universe. Inan, goddess of heaven, 13 ways to work with her. Inan is Ishtar. Inanna is her first name. Then she goes to Ishtar. Here's her symbols. The offerings, animals she's connected with, the domain. This is Ishtar. And then it tells you, study Inanna in myth, dedicate sacred altar space to her, provide regular offerings, stargazing, visionary journeying. There's PDFs you can download, justice working, drumming and dance, willow trees, her symbols, her storm magic. Okay, let me bounce back out of this. That's the stuff I wanted you to see. It's on your show notes, theroadtoconcord.com. That's a modern page going up telling people how to worship this goddess. She is, whether they know it or not, the Ishtar is the goddess of the LGBTQ community. She's behind that movement. When you start understanding things in a spiritual way, when you've understood what Dr. Heiser explains to us and helps you get back into that world, the unseen realm, you'll understand Return of the Gods. And he footnotes it all, both of them. They're scholars. They footnote their work. They invite you to check behind them. When you do this, you're going to start seeing that the things that you chalk up to just being depravity or we're all crazy or the world's gone mad, I've told you there are hidden hands behind all of this, orchestrating it all, in charge of the human actions. That's these principalities. I've told you I cannot explain the world to you anymore outside of a biblical worldview. There's a reason for that. You can't explain it. You can't make sense of it. If you're in science and you're looking for the one equation that explains everything in the universe, they're looking for one equation that'll explain quantum physics and the laws of the universe, natural physics and all this. They're looking for that one unifying equation. You can't do it in this world. It doesn't work. That equation doesn't exist. But it does exist if you're trying to understand human history and events. The equation that makes all of that come into focus is the Holy Scriptures. Properly understood, not the way most men teach it. Most men and women teach it as their own little fiefdom. You've got to be subservient to it. You don't make it, your domain. It has to rule over you. You have to understand it in its original context. Once you do, a lot of the things I've been trying to explain to you for 155 shows or so now fall right into place. Easy peasy stuff. Makes me look like some sort of smart know-it-all, but all I am is looking at the world through the prism of the Scriptures. That's it. That's all I'm doing. You can do it too. Oh, you just got to learn the Scriptures. So pop back in here and let's see if we can get these to come up. These are the two stories or links that if you read any of them, these are the two to read. This author is biblical through and through. And he goes through it first. He's defending himself a little bit because he gets attacked a lot. But where it really starts is right here, Ishtar. We've read that. I took that paragraph and I read it for you. And he goes through a few other things here and he tells you about Ishtar. And he tells you her history and how she invades into the holy world of the Holy Lands and Yahweh's people. He tells you some of that. There's his bibliography, gives you all his references. His second page right here, this is part 2 of the Ishtar story that he's got going on. More of her pictures. He's citing scripture here. We've read through this. I put all of that up in our slideshow for you today. But then he continues And he's looking at more of this. He goes through it and he gives you his references. This is why he's up in your show notes today. It's because he is a excellent source for us. His 2 articles are very good general discussions. And then the last article in your show notes today, same author, did an article on Tammuz. That's Ishtar's cohort or whatever. The one where the 40 days of lamenting and wailing and moaning and all that come from. Incidentally, she's connected to the Bel god, the god, moon god, also known as Allah today, Allah. Well, if you know anything about Islam, you know that there's a point there where they flog themselves and they wail and they mourn when they go to their pilgrimage. That's connected to her mourning over Tammuz. All of this stuff is it's all connected, and it goes back to Smur, and that's the first known civilization that we have in archaeology. The problem is, if you dig deep enough down in that city's archaeology, you'll run into a point where there are no religions at all. At all. People look at that through a secular lens, and they get confused, and they think religion was just created by man. They don't read the scriptures. If they did, that deep level of Smur, because it's not Sumner at that time, it's Smur or whatever, S-M-A-R. The name changes just a little bit, and when you understand a little bit about the Semitic languages, you'll see how the names just kind of morph over time. Basically, a lot of it's just adding vowels or maybe one consonant. But Smur and Sumner and Sumer, all same place. But the ancient times with no religions, that's as in the times of Noah, when there was only one religious man left on the planet. That's when that comes from. It was before the flood. And as soon as if you put that overlay over top of the archaeological evidence that our secular archaeologists can't seem to explain, once you put that biblical overlay over it, everything falls back into place. Perfectly coherent. They just won't use that overlay. And most people won't, because the minute you do that, well, then you got to acknowledge the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this is where I wanted us to go with Easter. I'm going to wrap this up on the class side, and we're going to see if Charlie has anything to add and if the class has any last minute questions. But as far as Easter goes, the church, the Holy Roman Catholic Church, and that's another thing. There used to be 5 Catholic churches. Catholic just means global, worldwide. There was one in Rome. There was one in the Byzantine, became the Byzantine Emperor, the eastern section of Rome. There was the Coptic Church. There were 5 of them total. I don't remember where they all were. But Rome took over all of them. Rome is the one who changed from Passover celebration to Easter. We know this. Passover is timed according to the moon, according to Yahweh's commands. We changed Easter to where we time it by the sun now. That's pagan in origin. We went to Sunday worship instead of the Sabbath. That's pagan in origin. We added Easter eggs. That is pagan in origin, but it's not. Easter is not connected to Ishtar directly. The egg is not connected to Ishtar directly. We added rabbits. Those are signs of fertility, rebirth, all of this stuff. And people will tell you, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just signs of rebirth and renewal, just like the resurrection. No. Be careful with that. That's making yourself a golden calf and saying, hey, Christians, look, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that brought you out of whatever, he gave you grace and we're good to go. Better hope he doesn't come down from the mountain, folks, because he's going to zap you if you do. Well, no, Joe, he won't. Oh, he has to. He promised to. So if he doesn't, he's unjust, which means he's not God. Be careful with how you practice these things. Search them out for yourself. Your pastor won't necessarily be a good guide here. I've told you before, the last church I was in, I asked the pastor face to face, when was the Sabbath moved? It wasn't, Joe. Well, why are we doing this on Sunday? Well, if I tried to move it to the Sabbath, I'd lose my whole congregation. I said, well, it's the word of Yahweh. And he just looked at me and shrugged. Who's going to pay the bills? In other words, he chose his paycheck over teaching the word of Yahweh, and he was telling me face to face that that's what he did. He chose the traditions of men over what he knew to be the teachings of Yahweh. There's a passage in the scripture that says he's in trouble. Doesn't mean he's not saved. I didn't say that. Said he's going to be judged a lot harsher. Going to take a few more stripes on Judgment Day. Might still get into the kingdom, I have no doubt. Going to take a few more licks for it. Limit how many licks you're going to take. Check into this stuff for yourself. It's more important than whatever's on your latest sitcom tonight on the TV. It's more important than who's eating what on your Facebook page. Now, tomorrow we had a choice. We either weren't going to do a show because tomorrow's a high holy day for Charlie and I. No, we're not Jews. We're just Messianic in the sense that we still keep Torah as best we understand it. And tomorrow is commanded day of rest. We're going to discuss Passover, the possible timings of Passover, what was going on. This idea of whether it's Good Friday or was Yeshua crucified on a Wednesday, that's going to be discussed tomorrow. It says, do the Gospels actually tell us that there was a Passover meal? Do they help us with the timing of how Passover and the 7 days of unleavened bread all work out? Can we justify the Gospels against the commands in Exodus? We're going to look at all of that tomorrow. So basically, today we did the Christian Easter. Tomorrow we're going to do like the Hebrew Messianic Jewish Passover. Because that, Charlie and I decided that Yahweh's not going to have a problem with his priests doing priestly work on a Sabbath day. That's okay. They're allowed to do that. Yeah, that's in the Torah. They can do that. So we'll be in here and we'll do that show tomorrow. So you're going to get two parts of this. Now, unless there's a question from the class, that's going to wrap what I've got right now. And I'm going to invite Charlie to pop himself in here now and see if he's got anything he wants to add or questions or whatever. And I'll let you see if you can put yourself in there, Charlie. And if you've got anything.
You were adding me and I was adding me at the same time.
Yeah.
Let me do my job, Joe. But I do want to just share a little bit about my personal journey on some of this stuff here. Actually, a lot of this is fairly recent because I put
no help from me.
All this, yeah, all this kind of spiritual stuff and stuff like that, kind of on the shelf. But I'm going to share something as I talk here, a little personal, but it kind of shows something. But in the scriptures, it talks about watchers, it talks about giants, it talks about these pagan gods. And, you think these things are kind of mythical and don't really exist, or just good stories. But as I've read in the scriptures, and then, like the books we've talked about, The Unseen Realm, Return of the Gods, and The Oracle, which I just finished, they're real. And, they're real, and I didn't realize how real. And as I look back at my life, this is where it gets personal. I have a son. Unfortunately, I haven't heard from him in over a year. But one of my last encounters with him, he was delving into some of the Eastern religions pretty deep. And we had an encounter where he verbally assaulted me. It nearly came to a physical altercation. And as I look back at it, looking in his eyes and the things that he was saying and things like that, I'm convinced he was possessed by a demon. Mm-hmm. At least one.
We've actually had that happen in our congregation. And look, folks, this is not Pentecostal. But there was an incident in our congregation where I spoke to an individual and at him, but I was actually talking to what I recognized as a spirit behind him. And we have a member of our congregation that watched that and witnessed it and physically saw the person recoil and writhe, and he was not happy with what I was saying, but I wasn't talking to the man. I was talking to that spirit behind him. Once you understand this, you will find why certain people act certain ways. They'll fit into categories. They'll believe the same things. They'll talk the same way. They'll do the same things. There's a spirit behind them. And yeah, but please be careful with this. I'm not Pentecostal. I'm not, and if you are, I'm not condemning you. I'm just telling you that the Pentecostal movement is not in total alignment with Scripture. What Charlie and I are talking about right now is literally in your New Testament. It's in all the Gospels. Believers will recognize that there are unclean spirits in the world, what we might call demons. Once you learn to look for them, you will start to see them. You won't see them physically in front of your face. You'll see their actions through other people, and you'll recognize the patterns. And once you know what pattern you're looking for, you'll get it. One of your classmates, I'm not going to identify him. I know he was listening earlier. He might have got called away. He's learned to look for this. And he has been amazed at how once he starts looking through spiritual eyes, those patterns from that particular unclean spirit start popping up in certain people. And he's told me, yes, they always talk the exact same way.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Charlie. If you got anything else.
That's just something that I was thinking about as you were ending the show here. But this stuff's real, and nothing against Pentecostal. My grandma was Pentecostal. I was when I was a child, so I've got that background, and but it's just things became so much more real to me, and it helped me to understand the workings of the adversary throughout everything that we're doing. We've talked about here how our government and our culture has been invaded by these gods. I mean, they've taken over, and Christianity is being decimated by them.
Just as prophecy says it would be.
As it would. And it's up to us, and we're going to be few. We're the remnant. It's up to us to find those that are looking to Yahweh and bring them in and teach them what they need to do, because there's going to come a time where we're going to have to, gather together ourselves and maybe even create our own society, because that's what the scriptures say.
That's first century too. That's Book of Acts right there.
The Revelations say that you won't be able to buy or sell, and we're getting real close to that. With the digital currencies and the possible fall of the dollar, if you're checking what Russia and China are working on, and the way I look at it is I've been looking at this. I used to be really scared of this and like, I don't want to go through all this, but as I've looked at this and the way the scriptures talk about the second Exodus, that it will be so tremendous and so overwhelming that you won't even remember the first Exodus. So that means that if you are of the remnant and you're
going to be moving soon.
Yeah, and you're commanded to move, it is very likely that you will be able to call down manna from heaven. You'll be able to strike rocks or even talk to rocks to bring forth water.
Or at the very least, you will be providentially provided for as you move back to the Holy Land.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. We've got to get to that level of faith, though, that we can actually do these things when they're necessary. And Yahweh will hear those prayers, and he will provide.
What it comes down to, folks, is you've actually got to believe that Bible is what it says it is, and that it means it, and that it'll work if you follow it. Remember what Yeshua said when he was in his hometown. He said, there's not enough faith here for me to do anything more than heal a few people. If you don't have the faith, the Spirit doesn't work. It's not that it can't. It doesn't. It's a choice by the Spirit. So, or at least it appears to be. Real quick, before we sign off for today, just as an FYI, Charlie and I are both elders in our congregation. It's a home congregation. We've got roughly about 50 people if they all show up at one time. Um, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, I don't know. Charlie can tell me if I'm speaking out of line here, but I'm pretty much the head teacher in our congregation now. I love Charlie for this. He doesn't accept anything I teach him until he goes and checks it for himself. I love him for that, because usually he ends up on the exact same page with me. And if not, maybe just another paragraph or two on a page before or after, but we're close enough. Sharky is also in the same boat. He's in our congregation. He checks behind me too. I beg you to learn to do the same when and where you can. Not because I need you to prove to yourself I'm right, because if you follow behind me and do this, your faith will grow. That's all I care about. Helping you to strengthen your faith and helping you to grow in confidence in your walk and be a better servant of Yahweh and a better disciple of his son Yeshua, and then figure out how to help him build his kingdom. And I don't mean you've got to figure that out. Figure out how to actually be the disciple and make other disciples. So that's our ultimate goal for this show. Today and tomorrow, you're seeing why Charlie is helping me. You're seeing why I do what I'm doing.
Let me
yeah, by all means.
Just share one other thing as you were talking, something that came into my head. Thanks to you. But it's not all thanks to you. It's been a journey. If you've been with the show long enough, you know my background, and I did a show with Joe. I spent 40 years in the Mormon religion, and coming out of that was a big deal for me, and it rocked my world just coming out of that. But even as I've come into trying to walk in the way that I understand Torah, through Joe's interaction and the things he's shared with me, he broke down even more things that I thought I had down right. And so my entire foundation crumbled for a while.
You're welcome.
But that was a good thing. And that's what I want to talk about. Some of these things that we talk about on this show, especially on Worship Wednesdays, can be very, very difficult to take in, because these are traditions that we have had in our families perhaps for generations. I've got a friend that he's actually the one that brought me out of the Mormon church. His family's heritage goes all the way back to the origins of Mormonism, some almost 200 years. And he came out of that. That took a lot for him to do away with all those traditions and such that he had. And we've got to have the strength that once we see that something is true and it's something that Yahweh has commanded us to do or not to do, we've got to have the integrity within ourselves to follow that.
Amen.
It's hard sometimes because you may have family members or other people that are like, why are you doing that? Are you becoming a Jew?
That's exactly what BB's family asked us.
Yes. I was, when I was coming out of the Mormon church, they were like, are you becoming a Jew? And my response was no, but Yeshua or Jesus was a Jew and I'm in good company.
Yes. Yes. We all forget that. Yeshua is a Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's a Jew through and through Jew. But he also created what the world today thinks of as the Christian church. Well, no, he didn't create the Christian church. He brought the new covenant and instituted the new covenant. But remember, folks, if you've read your Bible, pop quiz, anybody, who were the first converts? Were they all Gentiles? No, they were from the house of Judah. But then he said that he had actually come to track down the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He was sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So that's the lost tribes, folks. So we're going to cover tomorrow Passover from the Hebrew perspective, Messianic, Jewish, whatever, and from the scriptures. And then if we have any questions tomorrow, email them tonight, joe@theroadtoconcord.com and all that stuff. Road Dog, yes. I need a home online congregation. Any thoughts on a possibility? We're actually working on that. I know several people have contacted me for a little bit of help how they start their own home congregation. Two of your classmates here live close enough. I'm about to put them in touch with each other and see if maybe they can't get to work on that for themselves. We'll get a hold of you because if I'm not mistaken, Road Dog, I think you live in Alabama. So I'll have to work on that and see if we can't help you. You can also, right now, we throw our show up from our congregation. We put it on YouTube. You can find it. Congregation of Yahweh, Panama City, Florida. Just on YouTube, you'll find us. But pretty soon, with Charlie's help, we're going to improve the video on that because since we started the Road to Concord, more and more people are starting to tune into our teaching and our service. I think the teaching starts at 11.
Also, just in case anyone's interested, we will have a Pesach or Passover service on tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So that'll be after our show here. We're going to have to scramble and get up there.
We'll get it done, man. It's been a hectic week. We've got a lot going on. We're buffered on YouTube. Sorry, Marianne. All right, Charlie, I think we've pretty much run out of things we need to run our mouth about. So I will let you sign us out of here, brother. Do your thing over there. You hit the end, hit the exit video.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
Yeah, just go to brands and scroll down to where you see the little yellow snaky. Thank you for watching.